I always talk about seeking the Lord and what that means, just because I think a lot of people don't really know how to do that or use that in their faith. Or really that's kind of like the first part of your faith walk too, is how do you seek the Lord? So part of seeking the Lord is digging into Scripture and understanding what He means by certain things. So I was reading something the other day, and it was talking about a rainbow. And I was just thinking, I'm like, I have no idea what a rainbow is. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't. Do you guys, I have no idea how it's formed,
light,
or...
It's a refracted light, but I don't know what that really means.
Exactly. That's what I knew too. I knew just like the baseline of that. And, one of the most powerful verses in the whole Bible, in my opinion, is Genesis 9:4. When God said to his people, he said, "When I set my rainbow in the clouds, it will be a sign or a remembrance of my covenant between you and I and the earth." And it's like, okay, well, let's dissect a rainbow. Let's seek out the rainbow. That's one of the many ways you can seek the Lord, is breaking stuff down to a fundamental level, breaking words down to a fundamental level. So I went on a little scientific train of knowledge here. So, definition of a rainbow: an arch of colors in the sky in certain circumstances caused by refraction and dispersion of sun's light by rain or other water droplets in the atmosphere. Now, refraction, by definition, is the fact or phenomenon of light being deflected and passing obliquely through the interface between one medium and another through a medium of varying density. Also can be a change of direction light undergoes when it enters a medium with different density. Also, it is a bending of light, or it can be a bending of sound waves too, that also applies. The way the light bonds when it hits the eye to form an image on the retina. It is an electromagnetic wave of pure energy. It can travel through any material, any space, any surface, and it goes at the speed of light. So what an interesting metaphor that can be for who Christ is. A wave of energy. He can pass through anything, like nothing stops him. So just taking the time to think about, how God is describing himself. Also digging a little bit deeper, it says it slows down when it bends, when it goes through an object. So also, when you see a rainbow or you see an image, because of that refraction, because the way the light is hitting the water and it's bending around the droplet, and also the way our retina is, we are not seeing that rainbow where it actually is. It is an illusion. Huh. So illusion, by definition, is something that is likely to be wrongfully perceived or interpreted by senses alone. I mean, amazing, like with what faith is, because we cannot get the whole idea of who God is by our senses alone. We have to step out in faith and say, you said this in your word, and I don't really know where you're going with this, but I have to take that step of faith and trust in you and trust in that covenant that you initially started with me in the beginning when you called me into this walk with you. Now, dispersion is the separation of light into colors by refraction or diffraction with formation of a spectrum. Visible light is actually made up of different colors. So when the sun hits us, we are seeing white light. But that's an illusion. That's what the rainbow is saying. A rainbow is what white light actually is. The sun's rays on us are actually a color, are actually all the colors. So I don't know if you guys have ever read books about when people have death experiences and they come back to earth, like their heart stops, and they talk about heaven. In a lot of books they talk about the colors, like constant colors and changing, and we don't even understand how many colors there really are in this world. And that's because when we see a rainbow in the sky, we are seeing things as they actually are. We are seeing a glimpse of heaven. So rainbow is a mix of light, of water, and of physics. So white light is the sum of all visible colors. Short and long make up the different colors of the rays when it hits the droplet. Each droplet becomes separated and refracted and has to be at exactly 42 degrees to make a rainbow. Each color comes from its own droplet, constantly changing, constantly moving. Because of the refraction, the bending of the light, and because of how our eye is curved, no one is experiencing the same colors of the rainbow you are, and no one is experiencing the same area that you are seeing the rainbow. That is science. So how metaphoric is that to our faith? You are having your own unique walk with the Lord. Nobody's walk is like your walk. Nobody's faith is like your faith. Nobody's prayer life is like your prayer life. I think a lot of times people put Christians in a box, and that is so false. And same with God. Like, he made you unique. Every single person on this earth, there's nobody else like you. So going back to Genesis 9:4, when I set my rainbow in the clouds, it is a sign or remembrance of my covenant between you and I. So a covenant is a written agreement or a promise. Latin convenere means to come together. And when God is saying, this is a sign of my promise to you, this is a sign of my stipulation, this is a sign of your privilege with being one of my children, and this is a sign of your responsibility you now have because you have decided to enter into this covenant. And then the last part, and in my opinion, one of the most interesting parts of this research I've done, is the word covenant is written, it's a different word in the Old Testament and New Testament. It means two different things. So Old Testament meaning is to bond together. I think that was Hebrew. Don't quote me on that, though. And then the New Testament meaning of covenant is to order or dispose of oneself. Blows my mind, because initially God wanted to be bonded to us in the beginning, but now with Christ coming to earth, he called us to dispose of our old self and to start a new life and to be done with the ways of the world and to be done with the sin of us and declare war on it. And then the Old Testament meaning of covenant, most times a covenant is a bilateral agreement, both parties enter into it, but actually, according to scholars, it's a unilateral agreement. God initiated it, he determined the elements of the covenant, and he confirmed it with humanity. Our part in the agreement is to accept the offer, openly receive the results of his promises, and then finally, scholars have also said that they've been studying tablets from Moses' time in Judges, and by looking at those covenants, they were able to confirm that what God was saying when you see the rainbow in the sky is that, number one, God has spared you and given you undeserving favor. That is the meaning of the Old Testament covenant. He has given you grace when you least deserve it. And number two, according to scholars, the meaning of the Old Testament covenant is God is the ultimate king and he is the ultimate governor of your life. So especially with all the political drama that's going on in our world, and just too, like all the violence and all the heartache, and we don't know what it means, God's governing, God's ruling. He's the necessary administrator of law. He makes everything successful in his timing, and ultimately he wants a kingdom to flourish. So we need to drop on our knees if we're going to fight evil in this world. So Genesis 9:14, when you see my rainbow, be reminded of my grace. Be reminded that I spared you. Be reminded that I am your king. Be reminded that I am your governor. Be reminded that I gave you grace when you least deserved it. Be reminded how much I love you. Be reminded that you are seeing heaven. Actually, you are seeing a glimpse of heaven when you see the rainbow. You are seeing things exactly the way you're supposed to see them. You are seeing how beautiful heaven is going to be. That is the faith. That is the hope. That is what we persevere for. That is what we don't give up on.